I should thank Ben Maratapu for making this introduction. But Dan, over the past decade, a lot of companies have had similar visions to Huma, and a lot have risen and then failed. As Huma approaches almost $1 billion valuation, what do you think are the two or three things that you guys have done right that have meant that you have survived basically and thrived?
This is a really tough questions to answer because unfortunately or fortunately, we all get to live one life. It's not that we have full visibility to parallel lives and then you can do a real through assessment of what did we do that was right versus others. For sure, we were lucky, and I'm really transparent about it because I could pinpoint times that we could have not made it. But for the luck of somebody believing in us more than what we believed in ourselves, somebody kicking us to a different trajectory, which otherwise we wouldn't have gone to that trajectory. General wisdom is focus on one thing and do only one thing. And then somehow that got translated that if you want to make digital health work, you have to really be focused on one disease or one condition and then make that work and then scale from there. The challenge with the one thing strategy is, what if that one thing is wrong? And unfortunately, digital health and healthcare is not one of those industries that you get into to the bottom line in 3 months or 6 months and you can pivot quickly. It takes 2, 3, 4 years, tens of millions to build the software, regulate it, collect the evidence. And then by the time that you realize you're wrong and this is actually not going to add value, you don't have time. And that's why pharma companies, which are, I consider them successful businesses with a meaningful impact in the world, as one example, they talk about pipeline of asset. You never see a pharma company, you know what, I only have one asset and it's going to make it. As soon as you do that, probably your share price is going to tank. And that also, you don't see that. They always say, you know what, one pipeline of asset and that's it, or 10 pipeline of asset, but these are my asset. If suddenly they come across a good asset somewhere else, they feel it could be a complementary to their ecosystem, they acquire asset as well. And we really reflected on that. And we thought, what if we can create, I think the one thing is still important from the focus perspective, what if we can create a one platform that gives you the configurability and agility and adaptability to be able to support different use cases. Right away, you're getting a big saving from the money perspective because for each use case, you don't need to start from scratch. You just configure it and run parallel streams of multiple product lines or multiple use cases through your one single platform and really see which one adds value. Maybe asthma is the right one. Maybe rare disease is the right one. Who knows? Maybe everybody thinks it's, this disease. Maybe that is the one. This way, without needing to wait, you can in parallel, still in a very cost-efficient way, do these kind of assessments and see which ones are working. But also, as you tell this story, because nobody is interested just to partner with you for one disease because the hospitals, the pharma, they cover multiple diseases. And they don't want to have like 200 different partners on the digital health side. They're already struggling with the 10, 20, 30 systems that they have inside the hospitals. Imagine you multiply that by 300 external partners as well. We really made a big bet on this model and has worked really well for us in many ways. Combination of a flexible platform, combination of making a bet on some companies that they had some good asset that could be complementary to our platform. As you know, we did a couple of acquisition in our journey. And I think that is, if we wouldn't have done that, we would have been dead by now. That I am sure of. Now, how this strategy makes us the most and the biggest impactful healthcare business in the world is still a question mark, how we can get there. But when I look at our FDA, I think it was just such a pivotal moment for the industry. When I look at our EU MDR Class 2B, being the world's first and only configurable disease agnostic platform, I think that's a pivotal moment for the industry. seems like we are on the right track, and that is one thing that I can mention.
Can we talk about focus and shiny object syndrome? Because I wholly appreciate that when you have multiple focuses and you spread your bets a bit, that there is that kind of anti-fragility where if one thing doesn't work out, then something else might work out. But then there's also this argument in entrepreneurship where it's that if you don't focus on one thing and do it really well and you spread your team and your focus across multiple things, then you're not really doing anything properly. And so can I ask two questions, which are, how do you think about focus and what to prioritize, how many things you can prioritize? And secondly, are there then times when you still have to say no to things and you still have to, say no to basically attractive opportunities because you're like, no, we're going to be spread too thin?
Focus is the hardest challenge. And it's been the hardest challenge for me, especially in digital health as a whole also. It's not that there are clear use cases that are winners that you can make a big bet and go big. And also it's not a marginal improvement of the current systems. You're completely trying to change and reinvent something. It's not the telemedicine that, okay, I used to see my patients, now I talk to them over the video. It's not that kind of stuff. What I always talk to my team and try to encourage them and encourage myself with this approach, and this is actually something that Jony Ive of Apple taught me. Jony was like Dan, and I think he was just sharing Steve's really perspective on focus. Focus is not saying no to things that you don't like to do anyway. No. Focus is really saying no to something that with the bone of your body, you want to do it. And you know it's the right things to do. It's the good things to do. And you still say no. And we really try to implement this philosophy more and more. And every year that we are getting bigger, we actually try to be more focused. Because at the beginning, we had to be flexible to see what it works. And then every year, we are just like making it tighter so that we can go faster on things that we have tested and we have now some visibility that it actually works. We have the evidence behind it. So we are not fully focused blindly, because sometimes also you can be focused blindly. And in that equation, we really wanted to build our platform and our technology initially for ourselves, really, so that it enables us to do experiment, but still with one platform. So our cost of experiments is not 10 million for each disease, which is usually the cost it takes to build an application for a new disease. And then forget even about the regulatory and evidence that even would cost you more. By building that kind of platform initially to enable us to do experiment, not only we ended up discovering the use cases that really works, we think today and tomorrow, maybe more use cases will come to life, but also we created a platform that our partners love it, because as a AstraZeneca or a pharma company or a health system, you can partner with one company and can support many of your use cases, because diseases are more alike than unalike in many aspects. And the nuances that are different, you can adjust the platform. So that is what we are really trying to become, the kind of the platform that drives innovation and enables anybody to launch their digital health innovations really, really fast, really cost effectively. And that's what's really exciting for me, because it doesn't matter, Mustafa, how good we are. We are not going to solve all the healthcare problems through digital health by ourselves. We need to embrace and empower the ecosystem. And that is why our FDA approval, it's actually a milestone for the industry. It's actually a milestone for every small company and every big pharma to be able to take this and launch your own solutions, the same way that you go and subscribe to AWS for your cloud and build your own app. Now imagine that something for healthcare and digital health for a regulated world. That is how we see it and how our journey took us to where we are, which is just the beginning.
Dan, when I look through Huma's different arms and what you do, this follows on from what you've been saying, but it seems like in every tentacle of Huma, you've decided that let's not go right on the coalface. Let's go slightly upstream of that. So when we're doing decentralized clinical trials, instead of focusing on one disease area and doing one DCT, let's go upstream of that and build a platform that allows everyone else to do it. Another example might be, if a company was to launch like a telemedicine platform where doctors and patients can speak, let's not bother with that. Let's go upstream and build the actual white label solution for telemedicine that then other startups can use. So it seems like in every focus that you have, you've chosen to go slightly upstream and build, as you said, the AWS or the nuts and bolts or like the infrastructure of that layer. So the question to you is that always a sensible decision for a business to go upstream and focus on the infrastructure? Or are there times when that doesn't make sense? Because by that logic, it might be that every company should look to, go more upstream, and that will lead to bigger impact, bigger valuation, more interest from everyone.
It's a really tough call. And for us, it wasn't like 10 years ago we sat and I said, you know what, let's build this platform that's going to be multi-disease configurable, FDA, EU MDR approved. It wasn't. We kind of started a journey, as I explained, that we need to at least support multiple pipeline kind of use cases because you can't put all your eggs in one basket. We built something for ourselves, actually. And we started, doing more projects, both in the context of pharma, clinical trial, but also in healthcare. And we realized our clients, big pharma companies or big healthcare companies, also they're thinking of solving similar problems. And then suddenly we thought, you know what, it would be really cool. Maybe we should, open that and start, thinking it as an infrastructure play rather than pure product play. Still, we want to use our own platform to build our own products because that is the best way we can build a great platform for other people also build their products and launch their use cases. And we don't want to lose that for foreseeable future. And it's great because it gives us an advantage that to be 90%, 80% cheaper and maybe 5 to 10 times faster when we launch things ourselves with anybody, for anybody. But the true innovation comes when you enable other people to innovate. And that is not too dissimilar with AWS story. They built actually AWS Amazon for themselves initially. From what I know, I wasn't in the room at the time. These are the stories that they tell publicly. And then they thought, okay, maybe I should open it to other people because I'm solving a big problem for myself, which is applicable for everybody else. And I know how hard it is to get FDA and regulatory approval. And I know how important it is to be class 2 because without being class 2, you cannot do decision support, you cannot do predictions, you cannot do screening, you cannot do diagnostic. Basically, you cannot do anything that is cool and impactful in healthcare. You can only just transfer data from A to B and then let someone else do something. I can solve that for myself. We can solve that for everybody. And we really want to be that company that makes 2 people in a garage, 2 people in a small clinic in the middle of Scotland or in Palo Alto, or a biggest pharma company. They have an idea of launching a solutions to manage a specific disease or support a specific drug as a digital intervention. You should be able to launch it quickly. It should not cost you tens of millions of dollars, several years to do that. That's all. And that's why we think Huma just started its new era of its existence with the FDA approval and EU MDR approval.
Okay, but if we extrapolate away from Huma and just generally in health companies and startups, do you think that framework of trying to go upstream, do you think it always makes sense? Like, are there downsides to that as well? Like, that's the bit I don't understand. Like, what are the cons? Because it looks like it's a big gravy train and it's amazing.
It is. There is a downside because the downside is you build something infrastructure level. If you have no user, it dies. When you have an infrastructure that it benefits nobody, you're dead. We didn't build the infrastructure for people initially. We built it for ourselves. So it works, and it might, even if that idea doesn't work in short term, we know for long term it's going to be beneficial. We still have a great business, and we're going to use that. It gives us a competitive advantage to everybody else because it makes us, to be 10x cheaper and 10x faster kind of things. And at some point, we would love to get other people adopting it, and people are adopting it slowly since our FDA and EU MDR, which are both new. It could be exciting, and if it doesn't, it's still okay. We can be patient.
So the word of caution is that you might create something and you're trying an infrastructure play which no one needs, and there's a high upfront cost, I guess. So that's something to kind of bear in mind when going for that kind of play.
Oh, big time. And also you might not have any user. And if you don't have any user, yeah, it's like a TV channel that has no content. Nobody wants to watch it.
So I've been reading this book by Felix Dennis, who was a British billionaire media magnate. And he wrote this book called How to Get Rich, which is basically his book on lessons around life and business. And he has a whole chapter dedicated to ownership being the most important thing in any business venture. So he says, ownership isn't the most important thing, it's the only thing that matters. And that was like a real point that he emphasizes throughout the book. And I wanted to get your opinion on this. As many health startups that are looking to rapidly scale use sources of like venture funding, and slowly the founder's ownership dilutes. Do you think that that's a fair point? Like, do you think that maybe the most effective tactic is to run a private business without any external funding, retain full ownership, full autonomy, and not bother with this kind of stuff? Like, what do you think about that quote?
I understand why he is making that point. I think it really depends, because in most industries, if you're patient and if you have 20, 30 years time frame, you can build a meaningful business with very limited fundraising, but not a business that probably would change the world. Because when you're changing the world, you're actually going against lots of things. And those lots of things, either you have to pay extra money or pay time. And the problem with paying it by time is if it takes long time, because you're organically doing it, things change. Your surrounding change. All the assumptions change. So I think it's really important if you're doing a pioneering work, to raise money and invest into your growth and accelerate that. Also, it increases the speed of your learning because it allows you to do some mistakes. And then you learn from your mistakes and you can double down and triple down. So ultimately saves you time, but you pay the price by having less ownership, sometimes less control. For me, at Huma, one of the most important things wasn't actually the control that I would have or the team would have on the business. We just wanted to make sure that no one will have a single most powerful type of kind of control on the business. So suddenly, in case they have a different agenda to our business and our business is doing good for patients, which is the core of it, so we can just do what we want ultimately and not be pushed to compromise on what we are trying to do for our patients, or to do the right things. Give you one example. When COVID happened, you might have seen it in the news, you could, and lots of people could make a lot of money, and lots of people did make lots of money. We made every project related to COVID not for profit, some of them pro bono, from supporting the AstraZeneca vaccine clinical trial to virtual wards and hospitals at home, some of the national projects. And that wasn't an obvious bet because it was such an uncertain time. We had limited money and we could have been dead after delivering these projects not for profit. But my shareholders and my supporters, they all agreed that that's the right things to do. And in the worst case, even if they would not have had the same view as us, we still could have pushed for what was, in our view, the right things for patients, for the society. That would be a more important factor for me. And I do think entrepreneurs, team members, people that really put their life and bring change in healthcare and deliver results, they should be rewarded as well. So I don't like to see entrepreneurs that they have only 2% of their company after, whatever time. That's not right either, I think.
You did an interview with James Somaru, and I wrote down a quote from that. You said, "If we maximize impact, the commercial aspect will come." And I thought that was quite interesting because it relates to the quote, "If you build it, they will come." And it's this thought process around just creating value in the world, and then everything else, the commercial, everything else will follow that. And I just wanted to ask, do you, or say in the last few years, has that seemed true for you? Has it really been that, if you create products that add value to patients and add value to providers and pharmaceutical companies and things, that the commercial has just followed? Like, that to me sounds really like idealistic and sounds like that. Like, it sounds cute, but in the real world, that wouldn't really work. I would imagine that you would need a lot of focus on getting the commercial, and there could be a counterfactual universe in which you create a lot of impact and you are a great player in the space, but actually the commercial never really arrives and you die. So I thought that was a bit of an interesting statement. I wanted to ask your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there is a challenge in the industry. I talk about our industry. We all collectively have a perception of impact. And there are two different things, real impact and perception of impact. Give you a really interesting comparison. Eli Lilly, I think, I could be wrong, but one of the companies like that, CEO, I met him and he said, like, we have touched our drugs 100 million people in the history of the company. Probably this time next year we would have touched 100 million people. My impact, nothing close to their impact yet, because the kind of impact and reach and touch points they had has been a lot more transformational from the drug perspective that saves lives and this and that. Yes, we do have, and we have had some impact, but the impact of too many people, maybe it was small. So I think companies in digital health are still in that journey. And I still truly believe if you bring impact, people want it. You need to have technologies that you can live without. If it's a nice thing to have, it's whatever, then that's not it. This is a perception of impact, perception of being important. I totally stand by it. And of course, if you do impactful project, if you don't charge for it, if you don't monetize it correctly, if you don't sign a contract for it, then you won't make money. And if you don't make money, you will die anyway. So assuming that people do things correctly, right? If you bring impact, the money and the upside should come. And if it doesn't, and it's not coming, it means either the industry is not ready or it's not the real impact, it's the perception of impact.
I appreciate the differences between real impact and then perceived impact. But then when you're creating that impact, I suppose there's part of it that's packaging it, branding it, communicating it effectively. And one thing I noticed with Huma is that everything you kind of do is a bit aesthetic. It's like beautiful. It's like well thought out, designed from your website to your products. It seems like there's been a layer in there where someone's thought, I want this to be a pleasure to use and interact with. There's like a real focus on that. And you mentioned knowing Jony Ive, so maybe he gave you some tips. But what have you learned about that side of things around, it's a very broad question, but around like branding, around communicating, around storytelling about what you're doing? Are there any like high level, high yield things that you've picked up?
Look, my team, sometimes they come up with presentation. If the presentation has few dots not in the right place, I just don't look at it. Not that I'm like arrogant and I want to be like, hard to work with. I just cannot consume it. And I can't focus on it. If it's ugly, I can't focus on it. But also in back of my mind is like, if someone has created something really good and not put an effort to package it and present it nicely, because that part should take 5% of the effort if you have done it through good work. And the 95%, if you've already done that 95%, most likely you would do the 5%. If you haven't done that, puts a big question mark for me. Maybe that 95% is just also rubbish. So I don't look at it, and people know in the company. If you come up with an ugly presentation, It doesn't matter how many disclaimer you put, you know what, we did it quickly, la la la, before then, don't look at this. I just don't look at it. I can't. I just like, it's, you know, some people are colorblind. It doesn't matter how much you force them, they don't see the color of green. I'm like that. Because of that, we try as a company to do as much as we can in a polished way. I still think we do a very mediocre job, to be honest, in my opinion. I appreciate that you like it and you feel it's good, but I think it has to be even 10 times better. We invest a lot in building evidence. I think we are the most published company in our industry in terms of the publication, from Nature to you just name it. We do 95%. We still have to do that 5% the end even better, in my view. And I don't think we are doing that as much yet. It will be better.
There's this quote in like creative spheres about how great creatives start out because they have really high levels of taste. So even when you have no creative skill or ability, you have a lens on the world where you appreciate good design, good creativity. And it's actually that mismatch between what you see in the world and your like high level of taste that causes you to yourself become creative, because you try and close that gap. The question I wanted to ask is that with leaders who are like detail focused and extremely particular, and they have like very grand ambitions, they can be difficult to work with. And have you had to temper that in yourself to make yourself like easier to work with? Because when I kind of did a survey of your company, which Connie helps with, a lot of people said very positive things about you being someone who creates authentic, long-lasting, trusting bonds, being a likable person. But then you do have this side of you where you are very like detail-orientated and almost like a perfectionist. So like, how have you balanced those two energies?
Dilemma of my life. People think, and I sometimes use this example to exaggerate a little bit, think that I'm just too much into perfections because I want to be hard to work with. The reality is, it really hurts. When I see something, it's like someone take a knife and cut me. It hurts this much. And I really try to contain, you know, but a man has this much of energy to contain, you know, if you get, you know, stabbed all the time. And from the other side, when I see perfection and someone does something better than even I could imagine, it's just the greatest feeling and the joy of life. I was at Founders Forum last week chatting with Brent Hoberman, and Brent was just nagging about, I don't know, putting some spray in the toilet that his team didn't put, and he had to deal with it. And he's like one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the UK, and he's still get zoomed in the whatever was in toilet and being passionate about it, that he was talking about it in a conference. You know, I guess maybe that is needed. If you compromise, where do you stop? Because everything we can always argue. There is, okay, you don't need this and you don't need that. Maybe we shouldn't put as much as effort on this. And then suddenly you're going to have like something probably really ugly. And the people, they get it. It makes working is really actually joyful. And they want that from you, and vice versa. They expect the same from me. So if I show up with an ugly something, they just return the favor. And that is cool.
What have you learned about relationship building, networking, like that human aspect of motivating your team, all of those things? Like, are there a few lessons that come to mind where you've realized that, okay, through my experience with Huma, this is how you deal with people effectively and like inspire and motivate and build good relationships?
You know, this has been a very interesting topic. People, you know, talk about you have to inspire your team and this and that. It almost feels like engineering. Let me inspire my team. Let me make them inspired. I don't do that. I'm like me. I'm passionate about something, and that's that. And another topic, I would be the most bored person if I'm not passionate, and then probably that wouldn't inspire anybody. Can you engineer it? Maybe. It doesn't feel genuine to me, though. I have a bit of a problem with this comment because I guess if you do what you do as a job, I understand. I have a job and I need to go despite whatever I think, try to inspire people, da da da. But if it's what you really believe in, you don't need to inspire anybody because you're already inspired yourself. You're sharing your story and what you want to do. And then some people get it and get excited about it and some people don't. And that, works out, hopefully. I never ever thought about it. Maybe it's just me. I don't think that way.
Dan, with the greatest of respect, when I hear founders like yourself, even earlier you were talking about your like grand ambition to, improve the world, open source everything you're doing and really make an impact on the world. My bullshit radar starts tingling quite hard. Because in my view, a lot of, or most great people's ambitions can probably be traced to the 7 deadly sins rather than some great altruistic thing. So what do you think of that comment? And B, what did you find your actual motivation was?
I really agree with you, the 7. And it's usually one of those. But that could be the driver. You can use it for good. You can manage it for good. If that is one of those, the 7. You can be a very strong, capable person, but not hurt people. Do good with it. And I think that's when things get really interesting. When you can do whatever you want to do, but you choose to do something that is positive, let's call it that way. I think going back to open source and that kind of stuff, it's the only way, by the way. It actually helps the business to do things, make things more open source. Like, as an example, we decided not to maintain any of our patents recently because if our patents are bad and not useful, okay, what's the point of it? And if they're good and useful, let's make sure that it doesn't block anybody else to do it. That is how we think.
Fair enough. So you're saying that you do walk the walk as well as talk the talk. But what was your motivation that you found?
Why I do what I do?
Exactly.
Yeah. I will tell you one day.
Okay, fair enough. The last thing I wanted to touch on was how does your life materially change when you grow a company as large as Huma? And in particular, when I was reading up on you, I saw that, I think this year you spoke at Davos and doors must open. You mentioned that you're speaking to, Jony Ive. You are connected in this network of great entrepreneurs and great kind of innovators in health and stuff of the day. Does life really change when you perhaps build something this big, and especially when that message has got out to the world? I mean, is it a case that, you can just cold call the CEO of Pfizer and they're on the phone in 2 seconds? Like, what has changed? What has become easier? And maybe even what's become harder now that you're the CEO of such a large company?
Life gets harder because you have something to lose and something that you can lose it publicly because everybody knows what you do. And it's a really tricky place because suddenly it changes your perspective of how you look at the world. You're starting to optimize. If historically you were purely optimizing for, I don't know, your dream, and let's get there, as unimaginable as it might sound, at that time you didn't have anything to lose, but now suddenly you have something to lose. The level of strain and stress and pressure puts on you, it's huge. I never actually had anxiety in my life until the company started getting big. I never actually understood what anxiety and stress is, because it gets to a place that not everything is in your control. You can't, single-handedly, shit hit the fan, solve things, sort things out. And at the same time, you're in the eyes of everybody and everybody expects you. Different people expect you different things. The way you walk, the way you talk, what you say, what you don't say, what you deliver, from financials to impacts, everything. And it's a really tough place to be. But it's also a gift to be in that place because it really pushes you to grow. it really pushes you to learn new things that you didn't know before. And as a part of that, one of the side benefit of it is just like you get to meet some inspiring, unique characters, right? Alberto Pfizer, I've met him several times as an example. I've been intimately in house of some of the most important pharma CEO or other CEOs discussing stuff. And these are the stuff that if you want to, get there, you need to have like some of the smartest people with experiences, people with the things that you don't know, talking to you, sharing with you. Not a transactional sharing, is a really intimate discussion. And that is the greatest gift. And that is what I always wanted. I talked about university. The reason I wanted to go to the best universities wasn't that I care. I actually have very little value, in my view, for educations and how the education is done in today's world. And I think someone has to transform it. But the benefit of it was I could meet and sit and be surrounded with probably a pool of really smart people. Not all the smartest people in the world, because sometimes they don't do educations and they're equally super capable. But I could maximize my chance of being in the same room with them. And knowing what's happening in the mind of the smartest people in the world, now some of those guys are executives with big companies, I really wanted to know. I didn't want to die not knowing what the most important people in the world, the smartest people in the world, they think. And I think I'm really close to achieve that.
Do you think making a study of successful people and trying to learn from them, because that's basically what I'm doing, do you think that's a worthwhile goal? Or do you think you're really just kind of avoiding doing something yourself? Or maybe you're reading winning lottery tickets and you're just you've got this kind of survivorship and winner bias that you're just studying? Like, do you think it's a useful activity to get into the minds of really excellent, great people?
Yeah, it's a really tough one, huh?
Yeah.
And I know you're doing it because it can also consume you. People, we are like also unique in our own way, and so many factor plays a role in our success, and I don't know how transferable they are from one person to another person. And is there a book that you can read, suddenly you become successful, right? It just makes me, sometimes think when I see, read this book, you become a millionaire or whatever. The way I look at it is very simple. We are extremely lucky to be alive, because biologically speaking, the likelihood of us living the way we live is just like tiny. And I think if you really work hard and push ourselves with the understanding that whatever we do, it's okay. I don't think everybody should be an entrepreneur. I don't think everybody should be some of the characteristics that we call it success, because everything is okay. We should become what we really want to become and what we truly, not what the world tells us. Because in that way, I shouldn't have started the company, because why would you do digital health? The normal delivery of care was fine, I guess you could argue. I think there's a little bit of a problem in the world that success is just the money or the fame, or I don't see it that way anymore. I used to maybe see it that way. Even to tell you, I used to think as a company, the most important things at Huma is the mission. Nothing else mattered. But what I realized, actually, the most important things is the times you spend with the people that you're delivering that mission. Because if you don't have that, the mission will never get fulfilled.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can find all my links by going to bigpicturemedicine.co.uk. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, then please consider leaving a review. And by the way, all of these episodes are now available in video format on YouTube and on Spotify. Thanks for listening.